Hi dear students, welcome to today's online session on transaction analysis. This is your professor Ahamed Riaz. Now in today's session I am going to talk about transaction analysis, or commonly known as TA. Now TA or transaction analysis is a very important tool which is used by organizations, which is used by trainers, and which is used by human resource managers to understand the dynamics among people, to understand the group dynamics, to understand the behavior of employees and people around you. So let us get into the topic. Now first of all, what is transaction analysis or TA? Now TA is a method of understanding communication between people. Okay. Now transaction analysis is a system of analyzing and understanding the human relationships. Now in short, you can analyze and you can understand the intention behind people's behavior, why people are behaving in the way they are. Okay. Now this TA was first developed by an American psychiatrist known as Eric Berne. Now Eric Berne has drawn his conclusions and came up with this theory of TA from the psychoanalytic theory of Sigmund Freud, which we have already seen. Okay. Now so this has a lot of similarity to the theory, the psychoanalytic theory of Sigmund Freud. Now let us have a look at what it is. Now first of all, there are three important states of ego which was proposed by Sigmund Freud, that is the id, ego and superego. What is id? Id is also called as the pleasure principle, and ego is called as the realistic principle, and superego is known as the ethical principle. Now this is already known to you. We have already learned about this in detail, about the Sigmund Freud model. Okay, the id, the ego and the superego. Sigmund Freud said that it is the play of these three egos, okay, that determines the personality of a person. Now let's look what Eric Berne has to say. Now Eric Berne has said that, now basically he has renamed these things. Okay, he says we have three egos, that is child ego, adult ego and parent ego. Okay, he has given more explanation to these three states of ego. Now the child ego, also known as, always says I want it or I need it, come on satisfy me. Okay, so a child always asks for things irrespective of whether it is practical or not. So that is a child ego. So he again has classified the child ego into two, the natural child and the adopted child. Okay, we will come to that later. And then he says there is a super ego, that is, again he says there is something called as parent ego, which is almost similar to the super ego proposed by Sigmund Freud. Now he says there are two types of parent ego, that is the nurturing parent and the punishing parent. Now he says usually we have a state of ego where we say you can't do that, you must not do that, or it's not allowed, you're not supposed to do that kind of behavior. So that behavior comes from our parent ego according to Eric Berne. Now we'll get, and he says there is an adult ego, the ego which is being proposed by Sigmund Freud is renamed as adult ego, where one behaves neutrally as an adult. Okay. Now coming to the next thing, let us try to understand the difference between the Freud model and the Eric Berne model. Okay, Freud says there are three egos, id, ego and superego, the three states of mind, he says. But Eric Berne says that there are three egos, the three types of egos, that is child ego, again he says as a natural child, adapted child, kind of different classifications are given. He says adult ego and parent ego. Okay, in parent he says there is nurturing parent, the punishing parent. We'll come to that later. So we can tell which ego state a person is by looking at the kind of behavior. Okay, he says that we can tell which ego state a person is because of the verbal and the non-verbal behavior, okay, appropriate to each state. In each of the state, our verbal behavior, the way we speak and the non-verbal behavior of body language will be different. When you are in the child ego, the way you speak and your body language is entirely different from when you are in the parent ego. So, your body language and your way of speaking, the way you speak is entirely different. Now, that is, and when you are in the adult ego, your body language is different and the way you speak is different. Now, this is what we are going to analyze now. Analyzing these three things, how we behave, okay, when we are in these three different egos, that's all about TA, okay, that is transaction analysis. Now, we will get into the details of this. Basically, we will be trying to understand, so we will be trying to understand these things, okay, the structural analysis, what is a script analysis, we will try to understand what is the structure of TA, we will try to understand what is transaction analysis, we will also try to understand what is stroke and stroke analysis, we will try to understand what is a game analysis, we will try to understand what is a script and script analysis. Now, this may seem new to you, but we are going deep into it, do not worry. So, we will go one by one, we will go into it. First, we will try to understand what is the structure analysis of personalities, okay, that is how to analyze, then the transaction analysis, okay, how people communicate, how to analyze the personality, how do you analyze the personality of a person? We analyze the personality of a person using the structural analysis. Then if we need to analyze how people communicate with each other, that is using TA, the transaction analysis. Then if you want to understand how people recognize each other, how do they recognize each other, there you need to understand stroke analysis. There is a stroke, there is something called as a stroke between people, we will try to understand that. And if you want to understand the ulterior transactions, what do you mean by ulterior transactions? You know, they say something else, but they mean something else, you know, there are ulterior motives. So, if you want to understand the people with ulterior transactions, that is known as game analysis, okay. And finally, if you want to know the people put themselves in different positions, life positions, and that is known as script analysis. Now, we'll get into the detail of each one of this. First, we'll try to understand what are the ego states, okay. Burns said that we interact with people in different ego states. Basically, there are three types of ego states, he says, okay. The first one, parent ego. You know, at times we behave like a parent, okay. We behave like parent, okay, which we acquire from our parent. We have noticed how our parents behave to us, okay, when we were child, and usually we acquire some of that behavior. So, we have at times we come to that ego, that is known as the parent ego, okay. And next we have something called as the adult ego. So, that is when we behave like an adult. At times we behave like an adult, okay. We consider our partner as an adult and we also behave like an adult. So, that is known as the adult ego. And next, there is a child ego with us. You know, we often like to behave like a child, okay, when we were a child, okay. We used to behave in a certain manner. But at no matter whatever age you are, you often you have a nostalgia and you like to behave like you were a child. So, that is when you are in your child ego state. So, basically we always have these three ego states no matter how old you are, okay. Even at the age of 60 or 70 or 80, you have these three egos, okay. It's not your age that decides. Now, we will try to understand the basic structure of this human personality. That now I told you the first thing we are learning is the structure to understand the personality, okay. The parent ego in us usually is the taught concept. We are taught by our parents, okay, to be like this, don't do this, okay, or you are not supposed to do that. You are supposed to wake up early in the morning. You're supposed to respect elders, or kind of lot of conditioning. Lot of conditioning is done by our parents. It is taught by us. It is taught by our parents to us, either by parents or by teachers. Even teachers have a role in this, okay, in the parent ego that we have. Some teachers behave like a parent to you, okay, and you will learn a lot of things how to behave like a parent from your teacher or from your parent. So, that is taught you are taught to behave in a way that gives you your parent ego. Come on, then coming to the adult ego, that is not taught, that is thought. Okay, after thinking, you think before you behave in a certain manner. You think and you analyze that, okay, I should be behaving like this. I don't want a problem with the person, so I'll behave very mature. You behave in a mature way. You behave like a what do you call a mature person. You behave like a grown-up person often. Okay, that is when you are in your adult ego state. And at times you also come to a child ego state. And what is this child ego state? What is this child ego state? It is a felt concept of life. Okay, it is a felt concept of life. Okay, what do you mean by the felt concept? Okay, now the felt concept is what you feel like doing. No, the child always behaves like what it actually feels like doing. Okay, it doesn't look at what is right or what is wrong. The child feels like crying, it cries. Okay, the child feels like sleeping, it sleeps, be it in the class or be it anywhere. The child wants a chocolate, it asks for the chocolates. Okay, it doesn't look at whether it's appropriate to do that. So that is the felt concept of life. You feel like doing it. Okay, I feel like doing it. Okay, usually people say from the heart. Okay, you behave from the heart. In your child ego state. So these are the three states. Now let's have a look at, okay, Eric Burns. Okay, Eric Burns said there are three ego states. Okay, parent. Okay, when a person thinks, feels and behaves in the way copied from his parents and sometimes teachers too. Okay, and then what next? Next you have the child ego, thinking, feeling, behaving as one did as a child. That is the child ego state. And third is the adult ego state, the thoughts, the feelings or the behavior that are direct result of current happenings. Okay, according to your current age. When you behave according to your current age like a grown up person, then you are in your adult ego state. Okay, so the key point here, what you do understand is people do shift in and out of these states. They do shift in and out of these states, mind you. Okay, everyone. Okay, suddenly you are in a parent ego and suddenly you shift to a child ego and sometimes to an adult ego. Okay, depending on the person you're talking to, depending on the situation. So often people keep on shifting from one ego state to another ego state. So that's a key point. Okay, don't think that you'll be always you'll be permanent in a particular state. You know, you cannot. Nobody stays permanent in a particular state. If you stay permanent, that means you have some problem. Okay, if you are always in a child ego, that means you have got some problem. Okay, so that's it. So now the three states. What does the parent do? Usually, some people, if the way they talk, you can understand what ego state they are. If somebody is always asking you, always behaving or saying that do as I do, no questions, just do as I do, that means he is in a parent ego. Somebody, there are the people who always say, sir, what shall I do? What shall I do? Or sir, what shall I do? Or mommy, what shall I do? Hey, come on, tell me, what shall I do? If somebody is behaving like that, he is in his child ego. And there are some people who say, I'll be frank with you. Come on, let us be frank. I'll be frank with you. Or frankly speaking, this is. So that kind of a behavior shows that he is in his adult state of ego. So these are the three states. Now, parent ego itself, Eric Burns says there are two types of parents. Okay, in fact, there is a nurturing parent and there is a controlling parent, or sometimes also called as punishing parent. Okay, nurturing and punishing or controlling parent. So sometimes it depends on the kind of parenthood that you got in your childhood. Okay, sometimes your parent must have been very controlling type of a person. Okay, he is a very punishing kind of a person. Now, if you do that, I'm going to give you a hit. Okay, don't you do that, I'm going to punish you. Okay, don't you do like that, I'm going to snatch away the sandwich from you. So if you have always been warned of punishments, okay, then there's every chance that you learn it from your parent and you'll also behave like that. So there are two types, and sometimes there are there are parents, or at times your parents also behaves like a nurturing parent. Okay, come on, you can do it. I know you are capable of doing it. Okay, come on, do you want any help? I'm going to be with you. Don't worry. Okay, I'm there with you. Go ahead and do it. Always encouraging and nurturing parent. So you learn how to be a nurturing parent again from your parent. If you have an experience of being nurtured by your parent or a teacher, there's every chance that you'll also behave like that. Okay, so parent ego itself, there are two types of parent ego: the nurturing parent ego and the controlling parent ego. Now coming to the child ego, there are three types of child egos usually seen. The one is the natural child, and you have the rebellious child, and in the center you have something called as an adaptive child. Now what do you mean by the natural child? The natural child is a child who behaves very naturally like a child. Okay, like he cries for anything, he wants to say something, he just say that. Okay, he behaves like a very natural child. And what is a rebellious child? A rebellious child is a child, who is always rebellious. So there are some children who are very rebellious. Okay, who are very naughty and very rebellious. Some people carry the same child ego with them. They're always irrespective of the age, even if they're grown up, they're always rebellious. Okay, they don't agree to anything, and they always are very naughty in nature. Okay, very adamant in nature. They're very adamant about things. They want. They'll always they don't let anybody do things. Okay, kind of behavior usually is from the rebellious child ego. And natural child ego, okay, when you behave like a natural. And what is an adaptive child? In between is something you have, usually an adaptive child is a child who behaves exactly like what the parent wants to behave. Very obedient child. Now, adaptive childs are very obedient, so very adaptive to their parents. Okay, I won't do that. My dad doesn't like it, so I won't do that. My teacher has told me to do the homework, so let me finish my homework and then only I'll do anything else. So kind of a behavior, there are some children like that. There are some people who carry the same adaptive child ego into their adulthood. Okay, so that is known as a adaptive. So you have a natural child, you have an adaptive child and a rebellious child. Okay, now coming to now coming to the next thing. Okay, next we're going to discuss about. Okay, next we're going to discuss what are strokes. Now strokes are very important. You also should know how to analyze strokes. We communicate with other people by giving strokes. Okay, the way we communicate. Okay, a stroke is a basic unit of how you communicate. Okay, it can be the verbal communication, the way you speak. It can also be a non-verbal communication. Okay, the way you nod, the way you give a facial expression, the way you show some signs with your body. It can be any form of communication. A single unit is called as a stroke in transaction analysis. Now what do you call as a stroke? The stroke can be a positive stroke, it can also be a negative stroke. Strokes are fundamental units of social action. Okay, so maybe you also give positive strokes and you also give negative strokes. For example, you say something, it can have a negative impact on a person, then it is a negative stroke. You can also give an encouraging stroke, which can give a positive impact. Okay, so that's about then transactions. Basically, what is transaction? Transaction is an exchange of strokes between two people. Okay, so an exchange of strokes between two people is the basic transaction of human communication. Transaction is a fundamental unit of social intercourse. Okay, so the exchange, so a stroke is only from one side to another. When there is an exchange, you say something, you get something from the other person, then the transaction is complete. Transaction is complete. Usually we say financial transaction, you give something and you get something, that is financial transaction. Similarly here, when you say something and you get something in reply, the transaction is complete. So in between two persons, when there is a stroke from one side, a positive stroke from one side, again you get a positive reply, then two positive strokes make one transaction. you get a positive stroke from one side and you give a negative stroke in reply, again it's a transaction. It can be any way. Okay. Now let us have a look at what are the transactions. So transactions can be that is the exchange of strokes can be complementary, 3 types. It can be complementary, it can be crossed transaction, or it can be ulterior transactions, also called as games. Okay. So we are going to analyze now what do you mean by complementary transaction, what are cross transaction and ulterior transactions or games. We are going to look at it in coming slides. Okay. So now the characters of ego, each ego state has particular verbal and non-verbal way of behaving. You can see, you can observe this by watching people. You can now keep watching people from tomorrow onwards or today onwards. You will understand people are in different ego states. Okay. When somebody is scolding you, he is going to be in his parent ego state. Okay. Each ego state has a positive and a negative aspect. Okay, aspect. Okay. Every ego state has a positive and negative aspect. Now, these are some examples, okay, of some behaviors or some communications, okay, which can be matched to some sentences, which can be matched to certain the 3 different ego states. Now look at the first sentence. It's not my fault my drink got spilled on your new carpet. So that's a child ego. You're a child ego. You're again admitting, okay, it's not my fault. Okay, it's not my fault. It got spilled. Then you're saying, I wonder what might have caused that accident. Same incident. So that is, you're behaving like an adult. You understand it's an accident, and you're saying, I wonder what might have caused that accident. Okay, you're saying, oh, for goodness sake, clean up the mess. You're behaving like a parent. Then you're suddenly into a parent ego. Shall we clean up the mess together with a wet cloth? Okay, and that is something again, you go to a child ego. And you're saying, I refuse to get involved in this incident. I don't want to get involved in this incident. Again, you're being very practical, and you're getting into an adult state of mind. So this is an example of how you can understand different people based on their conversations in which ego they are. Okay. So actually ego states are present in all of us simultaneously. One of these will be in command and others at any given point of time. Okay. It depends upon one's age. Okay, each presents in positive negative aspects. Okay. Okay, that is, I think, is evident. And also you should understand that there is a shift in ego states. Okay, suddenly a parent says, why don't you prepare a time plan to handle your things properly? Okay, that is a parent ego, and that's a dialogue usually coming from a parent ego. Suddenly the child says, what is the point when one cannot follow it? Your child is saying, so, hey dad, what is the point when you cannot, what's the point of making a timetable and a time plan when you cannot follow it? Your child suddenly becomes an adult. You expect him to behave like a child, but he behaved like an adult to you. Okay, so this is what shift of egos. Okay, this shift of ego from child ego to adult ego by a child. Sometimes children also behave like an adult. Okay, now we'll look at the 3 basic concepts: the parent, adult, and child. Okay, 2 people. Everyone has this PNC, PAC. Everyone has this in them: the parent, the adult, and the child. Okay. So let's see how these transactions happens. Okay, there are different. So that is a structural analysis. The natural child means it's spontaneous, impulsive, okay, self-centered and pleasure-loving. And the adaptive child, already told you, very compliant, very obedient, conforms to the vision demands of the parental figures. Okay, so we need to understand this concept before getting into. And the rebellious child is very naughty and playful, always breaking rules. Okay. So these are different types of child egos. Okay, and coming to the transactional analysis for parents. Okay, nurturing parent comforts, praises, and helps others. Okay, comforts, praises, and helps others, and the critical parent always finds faults, and disapproves. Okay. we need to find out, we need to figure out which ego state a person is. Sometimes the person is in a critical parent ego state, always trying to find out a fault and always disapproving whatever you say, okay, always prejudiced. And sometimes there are he keeps on encouraging some people, maybe a manager in a company, he is a nurturing parent state, okay, when he is encouraging you, okay, when he behaves like a true leader, okay, and sometimes he behaves a critical parent like a boss, okay. Now coming to the transaction analysis, I already told you there are different types of transactions: complementary, crossed, and ulterior. Ulterior transaction, also known as games. Now we will try to understand what are these. Complementary is when both people are operating from the same ego state. That is complementary. Okay, both of them, okay, behave from the same ego state assigned to them. And crossed is one person reacts from an unexpected ego state. Suddenly the other person shifts the ego state and he behaves in an unexpected ego state. That is crossed ego state. Okay, there is a cross happening. Complementary is complemented. Okay, then you have an ulterior ego state. Okay, the two ego states within the same person. Okay, the two ego states within the same person. You understand this? But one disguises the another. A person has two ego states together. He is saying something. He is saying as a child, but he has intention of a parent. Okay, he is saying as an adult, but he has intention as a critical parent. So his intention is different, his behavior is different. There are people like that. Okay, that is known as ulterior transactions, also known as games. Okay, we will get into this. First, we will have an example of a complementary transaction. Look at this. A director asks the employee, okay, you are 3 hours late, I want an explanation. So, see, the director is in the parent ego, see, P ego, and he has put the employee next to him in a child ego. Okay, he is behaving as a parent and he has put his employee as a child. So, parent to child transaction from the parent to child stroke. That is a stroke. The stroke is from a parent to child stroke. Now, let us see what's the return stroke he is getting. I am really sorry, I slept through the alarm. It won't happen again. Okay, it won't happen again, he is saying. Okay, I promise. It won't happen again, I promise. Okay, I am really sorry, I slept through the alarm. It won't happen again. Okay, now this is the employee. Now let's the employee is also behaving like a child. So he also behaved like a child. His director is behaving like a parent and considering him a child. So he also decided to remain as a child and behave with the same complementary, okay, parallel state of ego given to him. He is given a child ego state. He remains in the child ego state. No shift of there is no shift of ego state here. So this is complementary transaction. Okay, this is a complementary transaction. Now coming to next, cross transaction. The same transaction. Next is example of crossed. Director says that you are 3 hours late. I want an explanation. Now let us see what is the stroke. The stroke given by the director is a parent to child stroke. Let us see what's the reaction stroke. Okay, what is the reaction stroke? The response from the employee. He says, oh, didn't you get up? Okay, did you get held up in that accident on the road as well? See, I was held up in the accident. Didn't you get held up in the accident? He was asking. What happened here? The employee has responded in an adult ego, okay, to the boss or to the director. So what's happened? So what has happened? You can see there is a cross here. Okay, the director wanted to be in a parent state of ego and his employee to be in child, but the employee refused to be in child ego. He has shifted his ego to the adult ego. So what has happened? There is a cross transaction here. So there is a chance of a conflict here. Okay, usually when there is a cross transaction, there is a chance of a conflict. Okay, so this is sometimes people refuse to be in the ego state they are assigned by the first speaker. the first speaker has assigned him a child ego, but he refuses to remain the child ego and he speaks in an adult ego. Usually people do this. Okay, so this is one thing. Now we'll continue. Okay, cross transaction, this causes a lot of difficulty in social situations. Okay, cross transaction can create problems. Okay, can create conflicts in the social situation. Maybe you should improve your way of delivering lecture. That's an example. Okay, an example is maybe you should improve your way of delivering the lecture. Okay, maybe you should improve your way of delivering the lecture. You are saying to your professor, that again, that can create a problem. Your professor wants you to be always in a child ego, but you are behaving like an adult with your professor, which can create a problem. Okay, now you always find fault with me, whatever I do. Parent child interaction. Okay, so this is some examples. Okay, now let us look at what are ulterior transaction. I told you, also known as games. Ulterior transactions are also known as games. Okay, ulterior motivated transactions that appear to be complementary on the surface, but at the end it has bad feelings. Okay, it appears to be like a complementary transaction, but at the end it has bad feelings. Okay, now there are three levels of or 3 degrees of game analysis. Okay, there are different degrees of games, 3 levels of games or 3 degrees of games played by people. People play games. Okay, they have something in mind, they say something else. That is game. Okay, their intention is different. They behave like a child, but their intention is different. For example, somebody says, oh, come on, you are not going to do anything to me. He is behaving like a child. Now, in between, he has told something very serious. Okay, so it's kind of things. So let us have a look at the different degrees. First is the first degree games. You know, that causes minor upset. Usually played socially, end up with some minor discomfort. Okay, some minor games you play. Okay, you say something without. Usually you mock people. You pull the legs of people. Okay, you say something with a double-ended something. You say double meaning. Something with a double meaning. You use some phrases which are very mockery in nature. So that's it creates minor upset. Okay. Second degree. What is second degree? More intimate and end up in very bad feelings. Sometimes you play some serious games with people. Okay, which has very bad feelings. End up with very bad feelings with very intimate people. You get more intimate and then you play games. Then there is something known as the third degree games, which usually involve physical injury. Okay, you call a person and finally you slap him. You cause some injury to some people, physical injury to people. Now there are games like that, third degree games. Now let us see. There are usually very few games have a positive or neutral outcome. Most of the games have negative outcomes. Okay, in these games, people play one of these 3 positions. That is, either they play themselves as a victim, they play themselves as a persecutor, or as a rescuer. So when he plays himself as a victim, he says that, okay, he always feels that he acts as or behaves as he is a victim. Okay, see, and sometimes he acts himself or behaves himself as a persecutor, or sometimes he will come to you as a rescuer. He comes as if he is come to rescue you, but actually his intentions are something else. So these are the different. Now there are some typical games. For example, I will tell you, between the director and the faculty. Okay, you can see when he says this training is challenging and you cannot take it, I believe. Okay, if he says something to his employee like this training is challenging but you cannot take it, I believe, the intention is not good. Okay, so it's a typical game. Again, a teacher and a student example. This is a good topic for a project, but you cannot handle it. The teacher says this topic is good but you cannot handle it. So there is a small game in it. Okay, the teacher is underestimating the student. The intentions may not be good or bad, so it can create a bad feeling in the mind of the student. Okay, the other one can the director's dialogue can create a bad impression in the mind of the faculty. So, these are some examples of typical games. Okay. Now, I think I will come up with the remaining thing in the part 2 of TA. I am going to stop here. Okay. I am going to stop here. I am going to stop here now for the time being, and I will get back to you. Okay. I will get back to you.